We were just talking about the lessons for today from Bill Clinton's foreign policy, but when Congress returns to Washington, there are some serious and potentially catastrophic fights looming over funding of the government and the debt ceiling. It's a familiar story by now, but the unified and sustained obstruction that President Obama has faced has its roots in the Clinton years. There's a difference, though. Back then, in the face of Republican overreach of 2 government shutdowns and even an impeachment, Bill Clinton's popularity just kept going up. Sahil Kapur of Talking Points Memo says that today's Republicans, led by John Boehner, have learned from the 90s and have perfected the art of obstruction. He wrote a piece this week highlighting what he says are the 4 big lessons the GOP has learned from the Clinton era. Here to talk about it is the author of that piece, Sahil Kapur, and another friend of the show. Sahil, thanks for coming up today. So before we get to the individual lessons, just talk maybe in general about it. We have the same basic dynamic in Washington today that we had in the Clinton years. The Democratic president, the Republican House, the very conservative Republican House. I guess the slight difference is that this Republicans had the Senate back then. They have the Democrats do now.
Right.
But there are very basic, similar parallels between how Washington is structured today and how it was back then.
That's exactly right. And, it's the president's first midterm election, newly elected Democrat. There was a huge backlash from conservatives, and they swept into Congress. Now they control the House, massive majority. And what the base really wants is for the new Congress, for the new Republican Congress, to thwart the president and to go after him in every possible way. And what the Republican leadership did in the 90s, they did a variety of things to try to please the conservative base then and to go after Clinton. They learned the lessons. The leadership has certainly learned the lessons, and they've kept those in mind as they're trying to actualize some of the same goals with Obama.
So we had the Tea Party revolution in 2010 that gives a Republican House. We had the Gingrich revolution in 1994 that gives a Republican House. Now let's look at these individual lessons you say they've learned to perfect the art of obstruction. The first one, lesson number 1, don't shut down the government. So explain that.
They did that twice, late in 1995 and early in 1996. Newt Gingrich stared down Bill Clinton. He shut down the government over budget disputes. It turned out really badly for Republicans. Newt's popularity, Newt's popularity went down. The GOP's brand was damaged. Clinton's popularity, as you said, just kept going up and up. This time, Speaker Boehner, who is leading a Republican Congress that is practically tailor-made for shutdowns, the budget disputes are so wide and so significant, has always managed to avoid a shutdown. And that's because he was part of the leadership team in 1998 and learned from that mistake.
But I guess I wonder, how long can that go up, though? Because I keep hearing them talk about it,
You keep hearing talk about it, and then at the end of the day, what you get is these very small budget deals, right? You're just kind of leapfrogging from one deal to the next. So we're not shutting down, but we're also doing this every
crisis governance.
It's crisis management. And so I don't know how long they can sustain it, but I'm wondering from you, you also talk in your piece about impeachment and how.
Oh, we're getting there.
I'm sorry.
We're doing let's take that as the segue to go to lesson number 2. And this is don't overreach on scandals. So explain that.
Right. So the series of scandals that started with Whitewater and culminated in the Monica Lewinsky scandal that led to the impeachment of Bill Clinton also worked out really badly for Republicans because the public saw it for what it was. It was an expression of primal distaste and just dislike for a Democratic president. And Bill Clinton, he was not impeached, as some Democrats think, for the misdeeds he did, and he was not, he was ultimately impeached because he was a Democrat in the White House. And that's what, the mismanagement, I guess, or the obsession with sort of bringing him down is something that Republicans have learned from. You have issues like the IRS scandal and other things that the president is worried about now, which Republicans are not going after in the same way that they did under Clinton. They're not keeping the focus on him, the leadership. Even Darrell Issa, whose entire job it is to go after the president, is saying we're going to focus on these things individually. We're not going to blame the president simply for everyone.
You don't think, though, that there is a significant chunk of that party, though, that is just waiting for the right moment? Because I think back to the 90s, and I remember, I've told this story before. I remember I was like 13 years old. It was like a month after Clinton was inaugurated in 1993. Nothing had happened yet. And I saw an impeach Clinton bumper sticker. And that captured the mood of the right, to me, for the entire 1990s. And it took until 1998, 99, to actually find, okay, we could say obstruction of justice, we could say suborning perjury with Lewinsky. To me, I hear the talk about impeachment now from a few of the backbenchers and everything. I say, boy, if they just have the moment, they're going to use it.
The backbenchers will want to do it, and there will be a significant faction of conservatives who do want to impeach the president and will just look for a reason to do it. And when they find it, they will jump on it. The leadership, in my view, won't go for it.
Key factor being there hasn't been a moment. Benghazi turned out to be nothing. The IRS scale turned out to be very little. Obama has not given them any kind of big moment yet. And I think they're ready for one. They haven't found Fast and Furious was not it. They just haven't found the moment yet.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's get to lesson number 3. And I'm going to give these. This is don't impeach the president for political gain. So we teased a minute ago, but okay, they didn't impeach him, but they're about to. We're not about to, but we're saying they're waiting for the moment. You're saying that.
And a lot of conservatives, a lot of Republicans certainly want to, especially the ones who weren't around in the 90s. But the impeachment in 1998 again worked out very well for Bill Clinton. Republicans actually lost seats in the midterm election of the second term of a president, and that almost never happens. And it was partly because the public was just disgusted by the obsession with the Lewinsky scandal and sort of a distraction from what they thought what would be the right thing to do would be to govern.
And we have lesson number 4, and this one is opposing health care reform is politically lucrative. So Bill Clinton tried to do health care reform 20 years before Barack Obama did,
and he was one of many presidents who tried to do it. Presidents since going all the way back to Teddy Roosevelt have tried to do it, and they've always been blocked. And President Obama is the first one to succeed. Under Clinton, their big insight was that it's very easy to kind of scare the public because the public is scared of big changes. So if you oppose this, there will be a backlash. Conservatives will turn out for Republicans in the midterms, and a lot of the independents who are skeptical of this will also turn out, and that worked out very well for them in 1994. So they applied this lesson again. They decided, I think, from the beginning, in my judgment, made a political decision to oppose whatever health care reform that President Obama came up with. And I think what they didn't count on was that he would actually succeed this time the way no president has. And if I were to add a postscript to this, it's that 20 years from now, if we're in a similar position again, I think Republicans will have learned the lesson of if you want to oppose a Democratic president's signature initiative, don't say it's going to destroy the freedom and people's freedom and everything they love, because then the base is going to demand you do all sorts of radical and possibly irrational things like shut down the government to try to stop it. It's not a coherent argument to say that this law is so bad and it's going to destroy everything you love about your country, but it's not worth closing down national parks and zoos and museums over.
Well, and that's really the interesting question here, right, Curtis? It is that, in 1994 they could say, hey, we killed healthcare reform, he tried to ruin the economy, he couldn't. How do Republicans get out of this moment of saying, okay, we can live with this law? When can they ever say that?
To that point, I mean, I think since 2011, when Republicans took back control of the House, they voted almost about 40 times on repealing and defunding Obamacare,
right,
to no avail. Obviously, that's not going to work. I mean, the president has veto power. The Senate is in control of Democrats. So it's kind of, and even just over this this August recess, Republicans are in town halls, Tea Party Republicans, and they're just denouncing Obamacare continuously. They're signing letters. 80 Republicans recently signed a letter to leadership, basically saying that they want this defunded and they don't want any spending bills that are going to come out. They want Obamacare to be defunded. Obviously, House leadership is not signing on to this letter, though.
But I do think that leadership sees an opportunity when the administration keeps delaying portions of the law or is trying to, manage different parts of the law to make it work better when implementation does go in. But they see that and they can say, look, the administration is admitting it's not working, they're delaying it. Why doesn't
which just speaks to if you're in that mindset of your base says this is socialism and it has to go, then you're going to look for every opening you can to please that base and say, and this is the latest example of why we can't have it, why we need to repeal it. And I just wonder, at what point will we stop? When will the last repeal vote be in the House of Representatives? Maybe we'll start a pool. I'll take like November 23rd, 2029 or something. Maybe, that's my pick. Anyway, what do we know now that we didn't know last week? We've got your answers right after this.